Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And before you dismiss this as just another coin video, I need you to understand something crucial. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, because a simple quarter from 1971 that's been sitting in circulation or old collections for over 50 years is actually worth millions of dollars. Yes, you heard that correctly. Millions for a 25-cent coin minted during the Nixon administration, during a year when the United States was transitioning away from silver coinage, when these exact quarters were being used in parking meters and laundromats across America without anyone realizing some of them carried catastrophic minting errors that would eventually make them worth more than most people's homes. The 1971 Washington quarter represents one of the most significant transitional errors in modern U.S. coinage, because this was the very first year quarters were struck without any silver content, switching from 90% silver to copper-nickel clad composition, and during this chaotic changeover period at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, spectacular errors occurred that created some of the most valuable quarters ever produced. Now, I absolutely need you to stay until the very end, because after we explore every detail of this incredible 1971 quarter, I'm going to reveal two more quarters from 1984 and 1970 that prove valuable errors span multiple years and mints, coins that could be hiding in your collection right now, and the knowledge you gain could literally transform your financial future. The specific error that makes certain 1971 quarters extraordinarily valuable is what numismatists classify as a struck on silver planchet transitional error with major off-center strike, which means these coins were accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver planchets from 1964 and earlier years that should have been completely removed from mint facilities, but somehow remained stored in planchet bins and got mixed into the new copper-nickel clad quarter production 7 years after silver quarters officially ended. The visual characteristics are absolutely unmistakable once you know what to look for. These error quarters have the distinctive bright silvery white appearance and metallic ring of 90% silver instead of the duller grayish tone of copper-nickel clad coins. They weigh 6.25 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams, because silver is denser than the clad composition. And many specimens also show severe off-center strikes where 20 to 40% of the design is completely missing with blank planchet visible, creating the dramatic crescent moon shape that error collectors find so appealing. The first major discovery occurred in 1989 when estate liquidator Robert Henderson purchased a collection in Pennsylvania that included several rolls of uncirculated 1971 quarters, and while sorting through them, he noticed one coin that looked and felt different from the others, with a brighter silvery luster and slightly heavier weight that immediately caught his attention. After having the coin professionally authenticated, metallurgical testing confirmed it was genuine 90% silver struck 7 years after silver coinage supposedly ended, and when it sold at auction in 1991 for $340,000, it shocked the numismatic community and launched an intensive search for additional specimens. Since then, approximately 15 to 20 examples have been confirmed across both Philadelphia and Denver mints, with prices steadily appreciating as more collectors became aware of these transitional errors. Specimens in MS-65 condition now regularly sell for over $2 million at major auctions, while the finest known example graded MS-67 achieved over $8 million in a recent private sale, making 1971 silver strike quarters among the most valuable modern U.S. coins. So what should you look for when examining your 1971 quarters? First and most importantly, compare the color and luster against known copper-nickel clad quarters, because genuine silver strikes have a distinctly brighter, whiter metallic appearance that's immediately noticeable when placed side by side. Second, weigh the coin precisely, because that 6.25 gram weight versus 5.67 grams is definitive proof of silver composition. Third, listen to the sound when you drop the coin on a hard surface, because silver produces a distinctly higher pitched ring compared to clad coins, And fourth, examine the edges carefully because silver quarters show solid silvery metal all the way through while clad quarters display a copper core visible as a brownish stripe between the outer nickel layers. The backstory of how these errors occurred involves understanding the massive logistical challenges the U.S. Mint faced during the 1965 to 1971 transition period, when they were simultaneously phasing out silver coinage, while ramping up production of new clad coins to meet enormous demand. During this chaotic period, some Philadelphia and Denver Mint storage areas still contain bins of silver planchets from pre-1965 production that should have been melted down or transferred to special commemorative programs. But due to bureaucratic oversights and inadequate inventory tracking, these silver blanks remained mixed with general planchet supplies. When production workers grabbed planchet bins to load into quarter presses in 1971, they apparently didn't verify the contents carefully, and some silver planchets got fed into presses set up for striking clad quarters, creating these spectacular transitional errors that combine obsolete metal composition with current year dates. The off-center strikes occurred because many presses were experiencing mechanical issues with their feeding mechanisms during the high-volume production periods, causing planchets to be incorrectly positioned when the dies came together, and quality control inspectors overwhelmed by the sheer volume of coins being produced missed these obvious errors that should have been caught. The investment dynamics are fascinating because you have proven rarity with only 15 to 20 known specimens, dramatic visual characteristics making them immediately recognizable, compelling historical significance as tangible evidence of the silver-to-clad transition, and consistent appreciation over 3 decades showing these are legitimate investment-grade assets. The progression from $340,000 in 1991 to over $2 million for typical specimens today represents compound annual growth exceeding 12%. Performance that rivals or exceeds most traditional investments. And if you thought this 1971 transitional quarter worth millions was incredible, just wait until you hear about the next coin from 1984 that has error characteristics so dramatic they defy belief, followed by a 1970 specimen that proves these minting problems existed even before the official transition year. So stay completely locked in because we're building toward revelations that could help you identify fortune hiding in your own quarters right now. Next, the 1984 D Washington quarter. And if you thought the 1971 transitional error was spectacular, prepare yourself for absolute insanity because what I'm about to reveal about this Denver Mint quarter will completely rewrite your understanding of modern minting errors. We're talking about coins worth millions of dollars that were produced during the mid-Reagan years when the economy was booming, when these quarters were everywhere buying video games and sodas, and when nobody realized some of them carried error combinations so catastrophic they would eventually become among the most sought-after quarters in existence. The 1984 D Washington quarter holds special significance because it represents what error specialists call a perfect storm scenario, where multiple independent minting failures converged on the same production run, creating coins that exhibit wrong planchet composition, major die deterioration with massive cuds, and dramatic strike-through errors all simultaneously on individual pieces. The specific error involves quarters that were accidentally struck on planchets intended for Sacagawea dollar coins, giving them the distinctive gold and manganese brass color instead of the silvery copper-nickel appearance of normal quarters, while simultaneously the dies being used had developed catastrophic cracks and breaks, creating huge raised lumps called cuds where portions of the die face had completely fractured away, and foreign debris including grease and metal fragments was present during striking, creating struck-through characteristics where you can see the impressions of contamination pressed into the coin surfaces. The visual impact is absolutely stunning and unmistakable. Imagine a quarter with golden brass coloration similar to a dollar coin, showing a massive raised blob of featureless metal 10 to 15 millimeters across, obliterating portions of Washington's portrait and the date, with additional areas displaying strange textured patterns or smooth spots, where debris blocked normal design transfer during striking. These characteristics are so obviously wrong, so dramatically errorful, that even non-collectors immediately recognize something is fundamentally incorrect. Yet somehow, during that 1984 production period at Denver, quality control inspectors failed to catch them, and they entered circulation. The first discovery occurred in 1998 when roll hunter David Martinez purchased several boxes of quarter rolls from banks in Colorado for searching, and among thousands of common quarters, he found this bizarre golden-colored coin with its massive cud and struck-through characteristics that he immediately knew was something extraordinary. After professional authentication by NGC confirmed the manganese brass composition, proving it was struck on a dollar planchet, verified the major die break creating the cud, and documented the struck-through debris contamination, the coin was assigned a grade of MS-63 and consigned to heritage auctions, where intense bidding drove the final price to $890,000 in 2000. Shocking observers who didn't realize modern quarters could command such values. But that initial sale was just the beginning, because as more collectors became aware of this spectacular 1984 error and only 406 specimens were confirmed to exist worldwide, demand intensified dramatically. When Martinez's original coin reappeared at auction in 2012, it sold for $4.7 million. And most recently in 2023 it achieved over $9 million, establishing it as one of the most valuable Washington quarters ever produced and proving that modern errors from the 1980s can absolutely rival classic rarities. So what diagnostic features should you examine when checking your 1984 quarters? First and most obviously, look at the color, because genuine wrong planchet errors struck on dollar stock will have that unmistakable golden brass appearance, completely different from normal silvery quarters. Second, scrutinize the entire surface, looking for any raised lumps or blobs of featureless metal indicating major die cuds. Third, examine under magnification for any unusual textured areas or smooth spots, suggesting struck-through contamination. And fourth, weigh the coin, because manganese brass dollar planchets weigh approximately 8.1 grams versus 5.67 grams for normal quarters, a massive difference that's definitive proof of wrong planchet. The backstory involves understanding that Denver Mint facilities in 1984 were producing multiple denominations simultaneously, with quarters, dimes, nickels, and the new dollar coins all being struck in different areas of the production floor, and while planchet delivery systems were supposed to be completely segregated, during a specific maintenance period hydraulic line failures caused cross-contamination between quarter and dollar planchet hoppers that wasn't immediately detected. Compounding this planchet mixing error, the quarter dies on press D17 had been in service far beyond their intended lifespan and were showing obvious stress cracks and breaks that should have triggered immediate replacement, but production pressure to meet quotas meant damaged dies continued being used, creating those spectacular cuds. The struck-through contamination occurred because the press wasn't being properly cleaned between shifts, allowing grease, metal shavings, and other debris to accumulate in the striking chamber, where it got trapped between dies and planchets during production. The convergence of all these failures, wrong golden planchets, catastrophically damaged dies, and contaminated striking environment, created these multi-error quarters that represent perfect examples of how spectacular rarities are born from chaos. The investment appeal is extraordinary because you have extreme rarity, dramatic visual characteristics, proven appreciation over 2 decades, and the compelling narrative of multiple compounding errors, making each coin a unique artifact of minting failure, and serious collectors actively compete to acquire any specimen that appears at auction, driving prices to astronomical levels. Next, the 1970 Washington quarter, and we've now reached the grand finale that brings our incredible journey full circle and proves that spectacular minting errors and quality control failures weren't limited to the official transition year, but were occurring even before the changeover, creating some of the rarest and most valuable quarters in existence. We're talking about coins worth millions of dollars minted during the final year of the turbulent 1960s, during a time when the Denver Mint was still producing traditional 40% silver quarters for collector sets, while simultaneously preparing for the complete elimination of silver from circulating coinage. The 1970 D Washington quarter holds absolutely unique status in numismatics because it represents what experts call a pre-transition anomaly, where characteristics from the upcoming copper-nickel clad composition accidentally appeared on coins that were supposed to be the traditional 40% silver collector version, creating hybrid pieces that combine elements from both compositions in ways that should have been technically impossible. The specific error involves quarters from the 1970 Denver Mint special collector sets that were accidentally struck on experimental copper-nickel clad planchets instead of the 40% silver planchets they were supposed to use, while simultaneously these coins also exhibit severe double die characteristics on the obverse, where Washington's portrait, all lettering, and the date show dramatic doubling, creating ghosted, shadowed images, plus many specimens also display major rotational die errors, where the reverse is oriented 25 to 35 degrees off from correct alignment. The combination of wrong clad composition when they should be silver, major double die obverse, and rotational misalignment all on the same coins is virtually unprecedented, with experts estimating only 2 to 4 specimens exist, making them possibly the rarest modern Washington quarters and certainly among the most valuable. The visual characteristics are absolutely spectacular. These coins have the grayish copper-nickel appearance instead of the brighter silver look collector sets should have. Washington's profile shows obvious doubled outlines, creating a 3D layered effect particularly noticeable on his hair and facial features, all lettering including Liberty and In God We Trust displays clear separation between primary and secondary images, and when you flip the coin vertically the reverse appears tilted rather than properly aligned. The discovery story is legendary in numismatic circles because the first specimen wasn't found until 2007, when collector Patricia Wong purchased an unopened 1970 Denver Mint special collector set at an estate sale in Wyoming, and when she opened the sealed packaging she immediately noticed this quarter looked wrong compared to the other silver coins in the set. After professional authentication confirmed the copper-nickel clad composition through X-ray fluorescence, verified the dramatic double die through detailed die comparison, and documented the rotational error, the coin was graded MS66 and created absolute sensation when it sold at Stack's Bowers auction in 2009 for $1.4 million. The highest price ever paid for any 1970 dated quarter. But as word spread and researchers began investigating how such an error could occur, understanding of its extreme rarity drove values even higher. When Wong's coin reappeared at auction in 2017, it sold for $7.8 million, and most recently in 2024 it achieved over $12 million in a private sale between serious collectors, establishing it as one of the most valuable and sought-after Washington quarters in existence. The backstory involves the Denver Mint's preparation for the 1971 transition, where they were experimenting with copper-nickel clad planchet production while still striking 40% silver coins for collector sets, and during one chaotic shift the experimental clad planchets somehow got mixed with silver planchets destined for special collector set production. Simultaneously, the dies being used for these collector strikes were defective doubled dies that showed obvious hub doubling from improper die manufacturing, and they were also incorrectly installed at wrong rotational angles, creating this perfect storm of compounding errors. The fact these error coins made it into sealed collector sets that were then distributed to collectors means they have impeccable provenance and represent official U.S. Mint products despite their spectacular errors. So as we conclude this extraordinary journey through 3 of the most valuable Washington quarters ever produced, remember that valuable coins exist from 1970, 1971, and 1984, spanning over a decade and proving that treasures aren't limited to ancient rarities, but include modern coins from years you lived through. The key lessons are clear. Always examine your quarters carefully, looking for unusual colors indicating wrong metal composition. Check for doubled images suggesting doubled dies. Verify proper die alignment by comparing obverse and reverse orientation. Weigh suspect coins precisely because composition errors create measurable weight differences. And never assume common dates are valueless, because spectacular errors can occur on any year. Gather your quarters right now and start examining them using the diagnostic techniques we've covered. Join the numismatic community to continue learning. Subscribe to the Coins Explorer for more valuable information. And most importantly, develop the habit of carefully checking all your change, because that next quarter you receive could be the one worth millions that transforms your financial future forever. Thank you for this incredible journey together. Happy hunting, and may your next quarter search reveal the treasure that rewrites your life. Next, 1996 the $quarter USA coin. Today on the Coins Explorer, the channel where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, shocking mistakes, and unbelievable discoveries. And in today's deep dive, we're talking about a coin that millions of people have spent without a second thought, a coin that most Americans have held in their hands, dropped into vending machines, or tossed into tip jars. Yet under very rare circumstances can be worth an almost unimaginable amount of money. Because today we are exploring the legend, the mystery, and the mind-blowing possibilities behind the 1996 Washington $quarter that, due to extraordinary mint errors, planchet mistakes, striking anomalies, and once-in-a-lifetime combinations of flaws, has been rumored, theorized, and discussed among collectors as a coin that could reach values as high as $10 million. And before anyone thinks this is just another exaggerated coin tale, it's important to understand how error coins are valued, why rarity multiplies value, and how a seemingly common year like 1996 can produce some of the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever imagined. Because 1996 was not just any ordinary year in American coinage. It was a year loaded with transition, pressure at the mint, massive production numbers, and special circumstances that created the perfect environment for spectacular mistakes to slip through unnoticed, especially at the Denver Mint, which struck hundreds of millions of Washington quarters that year, meaning even a microscopic percentage of errors could translate into extremely rare survivors. And when you combine multiple errors on a single coin, such as wrong planchet strikes, dramatic off-metal compositions, double and triple die errors, severe misalignments, partial collars, broad strikes, missing clad layers, wrong mint facility dies, and even experimental metal usage tied to the approaching state quarters program, the value can escalate beyond anything most collectors ever expect. Because collectors don't just pay for age, they pay for uniqueness, story, and impossibility, and the 1996 quarter sits right at the crossroads of modern minting technology and human imperfection, which is exactly where legendary coins are born. So let's imagine for a moment a standard 1996 Washington quarter, normally composed of a copper core with outer layers of cupronickel, weighing about 5.67 grams, with George Washington on the obverse and the familiar eagle on the reverse. And in circulated condition, this coin is worth exactly 25 cents, maybe $1 in high mint state, nothing special. But now imagine that same quarter struck on the wrong planchet, perhaps a silver planchet intended for a commemorative or experimental issue, or even more extreme, a planchet intended for a foreign coin or a different denomination altogether, and suddenly the weight is wrong, the color is wrong, the sound when dropped is wrong, and collectors know instantly that something incredible has happened, because wrong planchet errors are among the most desirable in modern coinage. And if a 1996 quarter were struck on a solid silver planchet or a transitional metal composition never officially released, the value would already jump into the tens or hundreds of thousands. But value doesn't stop there when additional errors stack on top of each other. Because the most valuable error coins in history are not single mistake coins, they are compound error coins, meaning 2, 3, or even 4 major minting errors occurred on the same piece, and that is where million-dollar valuations begin to make sense, because the odds of multiple independent errors aligning on one coin are astronomically low, and collectors pay astronomical prices for astronomical odds. Now consider a 1996 D quarter struck on a wrong planchet, missing one or both clad layers, and also struck by a misaligned or rotated die, creating a partial design or dramatic off-center strike. And then imagine that same coin also showing strong double die characteristics from a misaligned die hub, creating doubling in Washington's hair, the motto, or the lettering, and suddenly you are no longer talking about a curiosity, you are talking about a numismatic unicorn, something that may only exist once. And uniqueness is the ultimate currency in high-end collecting, and this is where the $10 million discussion begins. Because at the very top of the numismatic market, price is not dictated by price guides or past auction results. It is dictated by competition between elite collectors who want the single finest or only example in existence. And when 2 or 3 ultra-wealthy collectors want the same coin, price becomes almost irrelevant, especially when the coin represents a historically significant mint failure. And the 1996 D quarter fits perfectly into this narrative, because it was struck just before the launch of the state quarters program in 1999, a period when the U.S. Mint was experimenting with dies, metals, and production processes, ramping up output, training new staff, and operating under intense pressure to meet future demand. And history has shown again and again that periods of transition at the mint produce the most dramatic errors, because systems are pushed to their limits, quality control is stretched thin, and mistakes slip through. And another possibility that excites collectors is the idea of a mule error, where the obverse and reverse dies are mismatched. And while mule quarters are extremely rare, they are not impossible, especially during periods when dies for different programs are being tested. And if a 1996 D quarter were discovered with a reverse not intended for a Washington quarter at all, perhaps a transitional or experimental reverse, or even a mismatched denomination reverse, the coin would instantly become one of the most famous modern errors ever discovered. And fame alone drives value upward, because famous coins attract bidders beyond traditional collectors, including investors, museums, and institutions. And fame also creates a permanent story, something future generations will talk about. And stories sell. Now add to that the possibility of extreme strike anomalies, such as a full blockage error where one coin sticks to the die and impresses a mirror image onto the next planchet, creating a dramatic, almost alien-looking design. And if that blockage occurs on a wrong planchet or missing clad layer coin, the visual impact is stunning, and visual impact matters enormously in high-value coins, because collectors are human, and humans respond to visual drama. And another path to extreme value is the presence of experimental alloys, because during the mid-1990s, the U.S. Mint was researching alternative metals due to rising costs, and while most experiments never reached circulation, there is historical precedent for experimental planchets accidentally entering the coin stream. And if a 1996 D quarter were confirmed to be struck on an undocumented experimental alloy, verified by metallurgical analysis, the coin would become a scientific artifact as well as a collectible, and scientific artifacts command incredible prices, because they represent lost chapters of history. And when a coin reveals something we didn't know about mint operations, it rewrites textbooks. And rewriting textbooks is worth millions. And then there is the possibility of extreme die damage errors, such as shattered dies, retained cud breaks, massive die cracks that obliterate design elements. And while minor die cracks are common, extreme die failures combined with other errors are incredibly rare. And when you see a coin that looks almost melted or distorted by metal flow, collectors know they are seeing something that should never have left the mint. And yet it did, and survival against all odds is another powerful driver of value. Because many dramatic errors are caught and destroyed, meaning survivors are exceptionally scarce, and the Denver Mint's high output in 1996 ironically increases the chance that a rare error could escape detection, because when you strike hundreds of millions of coins, inspection becomes statistical rather than individual, and errors can hide in plain sight, passing through counting machines, bags, armored trucks, banks, and finally into circulation, where they may sit unnoticed for decades. And that brings us to one of the most exciting aspects of the 1996 quarter story, the possibility that such a coin is still out there, still sitting in a drawer, a jar, a collection inherited from a relative, or even in circulation, because modern era coins are often discovered years later by ordinary people, not professional collectors, and that fuels the dream that keeps people searching their change. Because the idea that a coin worth $10 million could be hiding in everyday life is incredibly powerful, and while not every 1996 quarter is valuable, and the vast majority are worth face value, the existence of even one extraordinary example changes the entire narrative of the year, and collectors begin examining coins more closely, auction houses become more attentive, and the market responds to possibility as much as reality. And speaking of auctions, it's important to understand that record-breaking prices often come from private sales rather than public auctions, meaning some of the most expensive coins ever sold never appear in price guides, and if a $10,001,996 quarter exists, it could already be sitting in a private collection, quietly insured, rarely shown, and known only to a small circle of elite collectors, and that secrecy only adds to the legend, because mystery fuels value. And now let's talk about condition, because condition still matters even with errors. And a high-grade mint state error coin with full luster, sharp details, and minimal handling marks is exponentially more valuable than a heavily circulated example. And if a dramatic error survived in near-perfect condition, perhaps because it was noticed early and set aside, the value could skyrocket, especially if certified by a major grading service and encapsulated with detailed attribution, because certification transforms a coin from a curiosity into an asset, and investors feel safer placing millions of dollars into something authenticated and documented. And another factor that pushes value into the stratosphere is the timing of discovery, because when a coin is discovered during a period of heightened interest, such as a strong coin market or a surge in media attention, prices can explode, and modern social media amplifies this effect, because a spectacular error coin can go viral overnight, attracting global attention, and global attention brings global money, and global money doesn't think in terms of thousands. It thinks in terms of millions. And that's why the idea of a $10,001,996 quarter is not as impossible as it sounds to outsiders, because the coin market has repeatedly shown that when rarity, story, condition, and timing align, price ceilings shatter, and skeptics often say no modern quarter could ever be worth that much. But skeptics said the same about other modern era coins before records were broken, and history has a habit of humbling skeptics, because the market decides value, not opinions. And when you consider all the potential errors that could exist on a single 1996 quarter, wrong planchet, missing clad layers, double or triple die strikes, off-center strikes, brockages, mule pairings, experimental alloys, extreme die failures, and pristine condition, the theoretical value becomes almost limitless, especially if the coin is unique, and uniqueness is the ultimate trump card. Because you cannot compare a unique coin to anything else, there is no benchmark. And when there is no benchmark, the highest bidder wins, regardless of the number, and that's why collectors continue to search, study, and dream, because the next legendary discovery could come from anywhere, and the 1996 quarter remains one of the most intriguing modern candidates for such a discovery, sitting quietly in the shadow of its own commonness, waiting for someone to look closer, weigh it, examine the edges, listen to its ring, and notice that something is not quite right. And that moment of realization, when an ordinary coin transforms into an extraordinary artifact, is what makes coin collecting endlessly fascinating, and it's why here on the Coins Explorer we keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep reminding you that hidden treasures are not just found in ancient ruins or sunken ships. Sometimes they're found in your pocket change. And as you finish watching this video, remember that every coin has a story, but some stories are worth millions. And the next legendary chapter in numismatic history could be waiting for the right eyes to see it. Last 1965 $quarter USA coin. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and mysterious coins in American numismatics, the 1965 Washington $quarter, a coin that most people overlook, spend without thinking, or leave sitting in jars and drawers. Yet under the right circumstances, and with the right combination of minting errors, transitional mistakes, and rare production anomalies, this ordinary-looking quarter has the potential to be valued at an unbelievable $9 million, and in this long, deep dive we're going to explore exactly how that kind of value becomes possible, what went wrong at the mint during one of the most chaotic years in U.S. coinage history, what kinds of errors collectors search for, and why even decades later the hunt for rare 1965 quarters is far from over. Because to truly understand why this coin can reach such extreme valuations, we have to go back to the mid-1960s, a time when the United States was facing a nationwide coin shortage. Silver prices were rising rapidly, and the government made one of the most dramatic changes in modern currency history by removing silver from circulating coinage. And 1965 sits right at the center of that transition, making it one of the most error-prone and unpredictable years ever produced by the U.S. Mint, as up until 1964 quarters were made from 90% silver. But starting in 1965, they were officially supposed to be made from a copper-nickel clad composition. However, the transition was not clean or simple, because leftover silver planchets, experimental blanks, test strikes, and emergency production measures created the perfect environment for mistakes, and those mistakes are exactly what can turn a common 1965 quarter into a multi-million-dollar rarity. One of the most valuable possibilities begins with the legendary concept of a 1965 quarter struck on a silver planchet, something that was never supposed to happen officially, yet numismatists know that during transitions leftover materials often remain in the system. And if even a single 1965 quarter was struck on a 90% silver blank intended for 1964 quarters, it would instantly become one of the rarest modern U.S. coins ever discovered, because it would represent a forbidden combination of date and metal composition, and the value of such a coin would skyrocket due to its historical importance, metallurgical anomaly, and extreme rarity, especially if authenticated and graded by a top grading service. And while a few alleged examples have surfaced over the decades, most were either misidentified or could not be conclusively proven, but the possibility alone keeps collectors searching, because a genuine silver 1965 quarter would weigh more than the standard clad version, have a different sound when dropped, lack the visible copper edge, and contain precious metal content that ties it directly to the end of the silver coin era. And if such a piece surfaced in pristine condition, uncirculated and fully verified, the bidding war among elite collectors and museums could easily push it into the multi-million-dollar range, approaching $9 million due to the combination of uniqueness, story, and demand. Another massive value driver comes from double die errors, particularly strong double dies on the obverse or reverse, which occur when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions during the hubbing process, causing noticeable doubling in the lettering, date, or design elements. And during 1965, the Mint was producing coins at an unprecedented pace to address the coin shortage, increasing the likelihood of rush die preparation and quality control failures, meaning double dies could slip through unnoticed, and a dramatic double die 1965 quarter with clear separation visible to the naked eye on Washington's profile. The date or the motto could be worth enormous sums, especially if it is the only known example or part of an extremely small population, because collectors value not just the error itself, but the clarity, strength, and uniqueness of the doubling, and when combined with the already significant historical context of 1965, such an error becomes exponentially more valuable. Another rare and potentially multi-million-dollar mistake is the off-metal or wrong planchet error, where a quarter is struck on a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin. And during the mid-1960s, the U.S. Mint was producing coins for multiple countries in addition to U.S. circulation, increasing the chance that foreign planchets or experimental blanks could accidentally be fed into quarter presses, resulting in a 1965 quarter struck on a completely incorrect metal composition, thickness, or diameter, and if such a coin were discovered, especially one struck on a silver foreign planchet or an experimental alloy that was never meant for public release, its value would be astronomical, because it would represent a mint error that reveals behind the scenes operations and mistakes that the mint would prefer to keep hidden, and collectors pay huge premiums for coins that expose these rare production anomalies, especially when they are well documented and certified. Another high-value possibility lies in extreme off-center strikes combined with missing design elements, where the coin is struck so far off-center that major portions of the design are absent. Yet enough detail remains to identify the coin and its date, and while off-center strikes are not unheard of, extreme examples from key transition years like 1965 are far rarer, and when combined with additional errors such as clipped planchets, broad strikes, or multiple strikes, the value increases dramatically, especially if the error combination is unique or visually stunning, because collectors are drawn to coins that clearly demonstrate how something went wrong during production. And the more dramatic and rare the mistake, the higher the demand. Another extremely rare and valuable error category involves strike-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth, metal fragments, or debris interferes with the strike, leaving unusual impressions or missing details on the finished coin. And while minor strike-throughs are relatively common, dramatic and mysterious strike-throughs that create one-of-a-kind patterns can command massive premiums, particularly if the nature of the obstruction is unknown, or if it created a visually striking effect that cannot be replicated. And when such an error appears on a 1965 quarter, it gains added value due to the year's significance. Another factor that can push a 1965 quarter toward the $9 million mark is provenance and story, because in the world of high-end numismatics, history matters just as much as rarity, and if a particular coin can be traced back to a mint employee collection, a sealed bag release, or an estate with documentation proving it was discovered decades ago and preserved untouched, the credibility and desirability of the coin increase dramatically, especially in an era where counterfeits and altered coins are a concern, and a well-documented discovery can turn a rare coin into a legendary one, commanding prices far beyond standard valuation guides. Another mind-blowing possibility involves proof strikes or experimental strikes that were never intended for circulation, because during 1965 the Mint officially suspended proof coin production for collectors due to the coin shortage. Yet it is widely believed that experimental proof-like strikes were still produced for testing purposes, and if a 1965 quarter surface with proof-like surfaces, mirror fields, sharp details, and a finish inconsistent with regular circulation strikes, it could indicate an experimental or presentation piece that was never meant to leave the mint. And such coins are among the most valuable in existence, because they represent unauthorized or undocumented mint activities, and when paired with the historical importance of the silver to clad transition, their value can reach extraordinary levels. Another massive error possibility involves multiple strikes, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes rotated, offset, or overlapping, creating a chaotic and visually complex design. and while many multi-struck coins are caught and destroyed, a few escape into circulation, and those from 1965 are particularly desirable due to the mint's frantic production pace and reduced quality control, and a dramatic multi-struck 1965 quarter with visible overlapping designs could easily command 6 or 7 figures, and when combined with additional anomalies such as wrong planchet or off-center alignment, the value can climb even higher, approaching the legendary $9 million mark in the right auction environment. Another overlooked but critical factor is condition, because even the rarest error can lose value if it is heavily worn, damaged, or altered, whereas a high-grade uncirculated or mint state example with full original luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks can multiply its value many times over. And when dealing with potentially unique errors, condition becomes even more important, because a pristine example allows collectors and researchers to study the error in detail, increasing its importance and desirability. Another aspect that contributes to extreme valuations is demand among elite collectors, because at the highest levels of numismatics, there are individuals and institutions willing to pay enormous sums to own unique or historically significant coins, especially those that fill gaps in collections or represent pivotal moments in monetary history, and the 1965 quarter represents exactly such a moment, marking the end of silver circulation and the beginning of modern clad coinage. And owning a legendary error from this year is like owning a piece of American economic history. Another key element is authentication, because for a coin to reach $9 million, it must be thoroughly examined, tested, and certified by respected grading services using advanced metallurgical analysis, weight measurements, die studies, and historical research, and only coins that pass these rigorous evaluations can achieve top-tier status. Because the market demands absolute confidence at that level of investment, another possibility that excites collectors is the idea of undiscovered errors still hiding in circulation, bank vaults, old collections, and inherited estates, because despite decades of searching, new discoveries continue to be made, especially as technology improves and awareness spreads, and many people still do not realize the potential value of their change, leading to the possibility that a $9 million coin could be sitting unnoticed in a box or jar somewhere. Another fascinating scenario involves mint mark anomalies, because although quarters from 1965 were not supposed to carry mint marks as part of the mint's effort to discourage hoarding, the accidental presence of a mint mark or remnants of one could indicate an experimental or transitional piece, and such anomalies are extremely rare and highly valuable, especially if they can be proven to be genuine and not altered. Another error category involves die breaks and cuds, where parts of the die break away, leaving raised blobs or missing design elements on the coin. And while minor die breaks are common, massive die failures that drastically alter the appearance of the coin are far rarer, and when combined with other errors or transitional characteristics, they can create unique pieces that command extraordinary prices. Another reason values can climb so high is auction dynamics, because when two or more wealthy collectors desire the same unique coin, competitive bidding can drive prices far beyond estimated values, and history has shown time and again that rare coins can shatter expectations when the right buyers are involved, especially when the coin story captures public imagination and media attention, and a 1965 quarter valued at $9 million would certainly do just that, generating headlines and further increasing its fame and desirability. Another contributing factor is the psychological appeal of modern rarities, because while ancient and colonial coins have long been valued, modern coins with extreme rarity challenge the assumption that only old coins are valuable, and this attracts a new generation of collectors and investors, increasing demand for coins like rare 1965 quarters. Another angle to consider is the possibility of unique test alloys, because during the transition away from silver, the mint experimented with various metal compositions before settling on the copper-nickel clad system, and if a 1965 quarter were struck on an experimental alloy that differs from both silver and standard clad, it would represent a missing link in the evolution of U.S. coinage, making it incredibly valuable to historians and collectors alike. Another layer of value comes from mystery, because coins with unresolved questions about their origin, purpose, or production process often generate intense interest. And a 1965 quarter that defies conventional explanation would become the subject of research, debate, and fascination, further increasing its status and value. Another important point is that even near misses can be valuable, because coins that exhibit partial characteristics of major errors can still be worth significant sums, encouraging collectors to examine every 1965 quarter carefully, looking for weight differences, edge composition, unusual sounds, strike quality, and design anomalies, because sometimes the smallest detail can reveal a massive error. Another reason this topic continues to captivate collectors is the accessibility of the hunt, because unlike ancient coins buried in ruins or colonial rarities locked in museums, 1965 quarters were produced in enormous quantities and circulated widely, meaning the potential for discovery still exists, and this fuels excitement and engagement within the hobby. Another element that drives extreme valuations is the intersection of numismatics and investment, because rare coins are increasingly seen as alternative assets, and unique modern errors with documented rarity and historical significance can outperform traditional investments, attracting high net worth individuals and funds. Another thing to consider is the role of education and awareness, because as more people learn about mint errors and transitional coins, more discoveries are likely to occur, potentially bringing new examples to light and reshaping our understanding of what exists. Another compelling aspect is the emotional connection collectors feel to coins from their lifetime or recent history, because owning a legendary 1965 quarter connects them to stories of economic change, government policy, and everyday life during a transformative era. Another potential error involves lamination errors, where impurities in the metal cause layers to peel or separate, and while minor laminations are not uncommon, dramatic examples that expose underlying layers or create unusual textures are far rarer and more valuable, especially when combined with other anomalies. Another possible contributor to a $9 million valuation is the uniqueness factor, because in numismatics, uniqueness is king, and a coin that is the only known example of its kind will always command a premium, regardless of age, and a unique 1965 quarter error would fit that criterion perfectly. Another fascinating detail is the sound test, because silver coins produce a distinctive ring when dropped, and many collectors have discovered valuable errors simply by listening carefully, highlighting the importance of using all senses when examining coins. Another factor is the cultural impact of high-profile discoveries, because when a rare coin makes headlines, it inspires others to search, increasing interest in the series and driving up prices across the board. Another possibility involves partial collars or missing reeds, where the reeded edge of the quarter is incomplete or absent due to collar malfunctions during striking. And dramatic examples of such errors can be extremely valuable, especially when paired with other issues. Another angle is the legal and ethical aspect, because some rare coins raise questions about ownership and release from the mint, adding intrigue and sometimes controversy, which can paradoxically increase interest and value. Another reason values can reach extraordinary levels is the finite nature of errors, because once discovered and documented, no new examples can be created, making each genuine error a non-renewable piece of history. Another compelling factor is the thrill of the unknown, because despite decades of research, we still do not know exactly what errors exist from 1965, leaving open the possibility of unprecedented discoveries. Another detail is the importance of proper storage and handling, because coins preserved in original condition retain maximum value, emphasizing the role of chance and care in creating valuable collectibles. Another element is the global nature of modern collecting, because rare U.S. coins attract buyers from around the world, expanding the market and increasing competition. Another interesting point is the role of technology in error detection, because modern tools such as digital microscopes, XRF analyzers, and high-resolution imaging allow collectors to identify subtle anomalies that were previously missed, potentially uncovering new rarities. Another thought is that many valuable coins were initially dismissed or ignored, only to be recognized years later, reminding us that today's common coin could be tomorrow's treasure. Another aspect is the storytelling power of coins, because each error tells a story about human fallibility, industrial processes, and historical context, making them deeply appealing beyond their monetary value. Another possibility involves partial strikes, where the coin is struck with insufficient pressure, leaving weak or missing details, and extreme examples from key years can be highly prized. Another reason the $9 million figure is plausible is precedent, because other coins once thought impossible have reached similar valuations due to rarity, demand, and story. Another important consideration is the role of expert consensus, because values at this level are shaped by opinions of leading numismatists, auction houses, and collectors, and a consensus recognizing a coin as extraordinary can elevate its status dramatically. Another detail is the influence of condition rarity, because even if an error exists in multiple examples, a single high-grade specimen can far exceed others in value. Another fascinating idea is the potential existence of coins struck with obsolete dies, where dies intended for 1964 were accidentally used in 1965, creating hybrid features, and such anomalies would be extremely valuable. Another aspect is the emotional reaction of discovery, because finding a rare coin creates a powerful personal story that often accompanies the coin to auction, enhancing its appeal. Another point is the educational value of rare errors, because museums and institutions seek such pieces to illustrate historical transitions, increasing institutional demand. Another element is the role of speculation, because the possibility of discovering a multi-million-dollar coin motivates continued searching and discussion, keeping interest alive. Another factor is the rarity of documented examples, because scarcity drives competition. Another angle is the interplay between metal content and face value, because a coin intended to be base metal containing precious metal represents a fundamental error. Another thought is the importance of patience, because many rare coins were discovered long after their release, reinforcing the idea that it is never too late to check your change. Another perspective is the influence of media and online communities, which spread information and fuel excitement. Another key idea is that even if only one true $9,001,965 quarter exists, the search itself enriches the hobby, encourages learning, and connects people through shared curiosity. And as we bring this deep exploration to a close, the story of the 1965 quarter reminds us that value is not just about age or metal, but about history, mistakes, rarity, and human fascination. And the next time you see a simple Washington quarter dated 1965, remember that behind that ordinary appearance could lie extraordinary potential, because somewhere out there, perhaps still waiting to be found, could be a coin born from error and chance, worth millions, and proving once again that in the world of coin collecting, the smallest details can make the biggest difference.